Hi, my name is Pastor Hal York, and welcome to Truth in the Trenches. Today we're going to be in Proverbs chapter 23, verses 10 and 11, where we read, "Do not move the ancient boundary or go into the fields of the fatherless, for their Redeemer is strong. He will plead their case against you." In chapter 22, we have a similar verse. "Do not rob the poor because he is poor, or crush the afflicted at the gate. For the Lord will plead their case and take the life of those who rob them." When we think about the widow and the orphan and the poor, they were people who had really no way to defend themselves. When they came upon hard times, when a widow lost her husband or a child lost their parents, they really were at the mercy of those around them. They had no way to defend themselves, and people would take advantage of them and because of all the things that had bestowed upon them. And you think, what could they possibly have? Well, sometimes they might have a little bit of land, and people would move the boundaries that bordered them over maybe a little bit at a time, but pretty soon the widow who had maybe a little bit of land finds all of a sudden she has no land because suddenly these borders have been moved and their next door neighbor has expanded their property, and the widow winds up with nothing. Or people would go into their fields and just ravish them. And really these people had nothing to do. They had no resources to protect them from those who wanted to take advantage of their sorry state in life. The sad thing is about these verses is that they needed to be written. I mean, think about it. These verses and many others like them reveal the ugly side of mankind. Imagine seeing a woman who's just lost her husband, or a child who's lost their parents, or someone who's come upon hard times and lost their jobs. And the first thought being, how can I take advantage of their situation for my own profit? I mean, how hard-hearted must a person be? Obviously, this happened a lot back then, but sadly it still happens even today. The world is filled with people who prey on widows, orphans, the poor. Even sadly, religious people can prey on the widows. If you look at the prosperity gospel and see how many people give to these charlatans, many of them are widows who cannot afford what they're giving, but they're giving to hoping to get rich, hoping to get healed, hoping for a blessing. And they prey on these people, and it's tragic. Instead of asking, how can I help them and ease their burdens, it's how can I deepen their sorrow, not lessen it. And Proverbs reminds us that people such as these have someone to plead their case, someone who is far stronger than those who oppress them and seek to rob them or defraud them. The Lord, their Redeemer, is strong. He will plead their case and take the life of those who rob them. That people could take advantage of such people shows the depravity of the human heart. Man in a sinful state does not just ignore these people, which would be bad enough. But the depravity can reach to such a state that he seeks to add to their hurt, to take advantage of them. Instead of giving to help, he takes what little they have left. But such dealings do not go unnoticed by the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, the judge of all men's hearts and motives and thoughts. He sees it all perfectly, and he will defend the fatherless and the widow and the poor. And James reminds us that God's people will do the same, or should do the same. James 1:27 says, "Pure and undefiled religion in the sight of God, the Father, is this, to visit orphans and widows in their distress and to keep oneself unstained by the world." You see this back in the early church in Acts, the spirit of generosity, looking out for those in need. In Acts 2:44 and 45, it says, "All those who had believed were together and had all things in common. And they began selling their property and possessions and were sharing them with all, as anyone might have need." One of the marks of a believer is a generous heart, looking out for the needs of others, recognizing that the blessings they are enjoying in this life are from God, and they are because of his mercy and grace. And God gives that we can bless others in need. Jesus taught us to pray, "Give us this day our daily bread." And sometimes he gives some people 2 loaves that they may share with the one who has none. One of the marks of Christ's likeness, of being like our Father in heaven, is that we help others in need, that we're gracious and we're generous. It flows out of a humble heart touched and changed by God's giving of his Son to die for us, undeserving sinners who were hopeless and powerless to save or remedy our situation, having no one to blame but ourselves. And while we were still sinners, Christ died for us, and he gave his life for us. He's given us richly all things to enjoy. He's blessed us with every spiritual blessing in Christ Jesus. And he tells us, let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus. So be a humble, thankful, gracious giver. How can we help the hurting, those who are easily taken advantage of by our society and by our culture? They will find an advocate in God, and they should find one in God's people as well. Do not move the ancient boundary or go into the fields of the fatherless, for their Redeemer is strong. He will plead their case against you. And may they find in us someone who wants to help and not hurt. May we have a heart that's humble and wants to reach out and help those who are needy, orphans and widows and the poor. May they find a friend in us as they have found a friend in Christ. May this truth guard us and guide us in the trenches of life as we seek to live our lives for the glory of God and the good of others. May God bless.